Vietnam in 1970-71. So, when was it? 71. June and July of 71. I went back to Phu Bai, up north, up in I Corps. And there we were engaged. That's when I went with the military intelligence people, the Army Security Agency. And you hear terms like SIGINT, Signals Intelligence. That's what we were doing up there. And
were you a civilian?
No, that's when I came back into the Army. I entered the Army, in 1970. I re-entered in 1970. I took a break, about 33 months. I went to college, moved, went down to Florida, went to school down there. And, but I was not really happy. And, yeah, kind of, you know how it is, that people, you're trying to find your way. I didn't, there was no occupation that I had that I really wanted to do. I didn't want to be an engineer or
Is that what you went
an
to
auto
school for?
mechanic. No. I'm just as an example, or an auto mechanic, or a carpenter, or something like that. And so it's, even though I was going to college, I felt kind of unfulfilled, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking all along, I kind of like the Army. I like the fact that there's somebody in charge. I like the fact that they have clear missions. You go somewhere and you know what you're supposed to be doing, that there's organization. I liked all of those things. And candidly, I also liked to travel. Vietnam was certainly not my idea of a vacation, but it was an experience, an eye-opening experience. Different cultures, different lands, different everything. The scenery, the food, what have you. I had an R&R to Malaysia, and again, that gave you another idea. What it was like to do a little bit of travel, and that was a part of it. So I came back in after 33 months, and I was allowed to keep my rank, which was nice. So. I came in, I went up to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and an organization called the Army Security Agency. And today it's all wrapped up in what is called MI, military intelligence. But back then it was like a separate army unto itself. And they did things like signals intelligence, all the INTs, the intelligence, human intelligence, and photo intelligence, and the list goes on and on.
Did you have a choice, or did you just end up?
Well, it was kind of a choice. When I went in and re-enlisted, I really thought I would like to be perhaps an interrogator or something along those lines. But I listened to the recruiter, and he said, "Well, you really qualify for this, and you do well here and that." And as it turns out, I ended up being a Morse code intercept operator, and which was pretty good. There was not a bad field, and I went to training at Fort Devens, and then from Fort Devens, I had actually wanted to go back to Vietnam, and I couldn't. No one in my class, my graduating class at Fort Devens, went to Vietnam. I had a friend. And he called.
Wait, why did you want to go back to Vietnam?
Just to see what was going on, see what it was like, and be a part of it again, that type of thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but it was, you could be subject to some mortar attacks and things like that, but it was really the type of work was more base camp type, and you went in, you put your headphones on, and you're an electronic spy is what you are. And so this could be pretty interesting. Here's where all the action is. I can help soldiers. I can potentially you could be saving somebody's life. So, but anyway, I couldn't go. No assignments there. I had a friend though up there, and he called down to the headquarters, and the guy said, "Don't worry, I got you a good assignment." And he did. He came through. I got Taiwan, so I was stationed right outside Taipei, Taiwan.
Well, why did you mention you were in Phu Bai?
Well, because while I was in Taiwan, they had a call. Even though nobody was being reassigned to Vietnam, they were short in June and July.
Oh.
They had this big rotation, and they were going to be short people. So they called out, and 20 of us went to Vietnam. And 10 went down south and 10 of us went up north. And I ended up being with the group that went up north. So I ended up at a place called Phu Bai and spent a couple of months there. And ran into a couple of friends from Fort Devens, people that I knew there. And worked for a couple of months and then came back to Taiwan. And, had a year and a half there in Taiwan. And from Taiwan, I went to a place called Misawa, Japan, which was up on the northern tip of Japan, the main island. And spent about 30 months up there. That's where I met my wife.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. My wife, ironically, is a Japanese American from Hawaii. And I met her in Japan because she was a school teacher for the Department of Defense. So the school teachers there lived right on base. And I met her, one of my friends from Fort Devens, his wife was a school teacher also. And through them I met my wife. And so by the time I left Japan, I was married. And yeah, that was in 1975. I was my 30-month tour became a 33-month tour because they actually ran out of money to move soldiers, what they call a PCS, permanent change of station. And I was supposed to leave in March, and they didn't have any money until the 1st of July.
Oh, the fiscal year.
The fiscal year back then was the 1st of July.
That's how it is in New Jersey, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 1st of July. So.
What did you prefer, Japan or Taiwan? Other than your wife?
Well,
Yeah,
I never really thought about it in that regard, but probably Japan. Taiwan was a lot of fun, but Japan, I didn't have a car in Taiwan. I just got around with local public transportation, things like that. And yeah, it's I don't know. I just seem to enjoy Japan more. Seemed like did a little more traveling, got around a little more. In Taiwan, it was more kind of focused on work more than anything else. And not that we didn't, didn't enjoy time off or go anywhere, but we never had a lot of people. So if you were with a group like say the equivalent of a platoon, they call them tricks, if you will, trick 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it was like a platoon, but we never had enough for 4 platoons, we only had enough for 3. So what it meant was that you took your days off internally. It's not like the whole platoon went to work Monday through Friday and then you were off. It was we worked continually, and I worked swings. I worked from 3 to 11. And if you needed to man 15 positions and you had 20 people, that meant 5 people could have 2 days off. Because that's what you work. You worked a 6 and 2, 6 days on, 2 days off, that kind of thing. And so, again, it was more of a kind of a work-focused, kind of thing. But Taiwan was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it and enjoyed my time there. But, and maybe some of it too, again, when I got up to Misawa, I got promoted and there was more responsibility and things, that whole thing. And so I would have to say probably Japan.
Can you speak about signal intelligence gathering during the Cold War?
It was big business. And back then, there was a lot of Morse code, a lot of high frequency radios, radio emissions, and there was still some today, but it's not like nothing like what it was back then. Back then there was a lot, and there were stations all over the world, and you had loads of them in Germany and in England, in Italy, Turkey, I'm trying to think of some of the places, Ethiopia, Iran, and then all throughout Asia, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, Thailand, of course Vietnam. You had all these, Alaska, it was all over the world. And some still exist, but they do different kinds of intercept now. And But back then, we were doing a lot of Morse code, lots and lots of it, and we would do direction finding, radio direction finding.
So how have you kept up with the, you mentioned nowadays? How do you know what's happening nowadays?
Just through, I belong to an organization called AUSA, Association of the United States Army, and talking to people online, and yeah, Army magazines, periodicals, things like that. I mean, I don't get any classified information. It just, but you can piece stuff together. You know, you kind of know what's going on. Which brings me to another point. The Hillary Clinton's emails. Okay, all those accounts that she had, I had the same kind of accounts. You know, the secret network, the top secret network, etc. And we were trained, and not as the Secretary of State, but we were trained as individual soldiers, and I was trained as a Department of the Army civilian that you need to, if you recognize classified material, you need to act accordingly, you know. And you should be able to recognize what is classified and what is not classified. And I will tell you that you cannot take a classified message and send it to an unclassified machine, okay? You can't send from one account to another. You physically have to move that. You've got to either scan it or retype it.
Oh, okay.
You cannot send an email from a secret network to an unclassified network. So all the stuff that's going on, she was either incredibly stupid or just had a complete disregard for national security. And I think candidly, in many cases, she just figured, hey, I can do whatever I want. You know, that type of thing. But I'm just telling you as an aside, you cannot physically send email from one account to another. There had to be some kind of action that took place to do that. But anyway, that's a little bit of an aside. But I try to keep up as best I can. But again, after having been in the business for many, many years, you can kind of, from what you read, you can kind of infer, you know, what's going on.
So when you mentioned Department of Army employee, when did you become a federal employee?
Yes, I retired from the Army in 1994.
I'm sorry, we should first mention another war you were in.
Oh, Desert Storm.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't mention that you were at Fort Bliss, Texas.
Well, I was stationed there a couple of times. The first time as an electronic warfare operator on aircraft, U-21s, RU-21s, and the system was designed to go, it was called Seafarm Leader, just a code name, that's all, it doesn't mean anything. And they had aircraft that would do radio direction finding, airborne direction finding, okay, and they had a couple of aircraft that would do intercept radio signals, and then they had a couple of aircraft that were jammers, and I used to operate the jammers. So what we would do, we would actually, the system, as I said, never went to Vietnam, but we would train American soldiers. So when you had a big exercise, a big military exercise going on, say maybe at Fort Bragg or Fort Carson, Colorado, or something like that, we would go there and we would work against American soldiers, and we would intercept their traffic, and with the jammers I'd come up on their frequencies and I'd jam them. And this was so, if you were jammed in a real situation, so you'd know how to react, what to do, that kind of thing. So I did that at El Paso for a couple of years, and we went as far away as Alaska. We went all the way up to Fairbanks, and then down Georgia, Pensacola, Florida, you know, places like that, Eglin Air Force Base, kind of all over the country.
Where, I forget, where's Eglin Air Force Base?
Oh, that's down there in the Panhandle of Florida, down there by Pensacola.
So was Vietnam still going on at the time?
No, it was over. Vietnam ended when I was in Japan, and I still remember I was on shift that time, and teletype came in, and the war's over, and I remember walking back, and I said, gee, I can't believe it. It's like it's been a part of my life for the majority of my life, and now all of a sudden it's over. But that had ended, and by the time I left Japan, which was '75, and I went to school for 6 months after Japan at the National Security Agency in Fort Meade, Maryland, and after that schooling, then I went to El Paso. Got to El Paso in January of '76.
So your wife went with you to all these places?
After Japan, yeah. She went with me to Fort Meade. Then we went to El Paso, and I had that assignment with the first ASA Aviation Company, which was Seafarm Leader. And she was there. We had both of our kids. Both of our kids were born in El Paso, and at the William Beaumont Army Medical Center. Incidentally, that's while I was there, the highest ranking person in the Army was there. It was General Omar Bradley. That's where his last residence was there, in El Paso.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So then from there, I wanted to go to Germany, and Cold War's going on, what have you. But I ended up being reassigned to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, to teach at the school that I attended back in '70, '71. So I was an instructor at the same school, and I did that for a year and a half.
How far was that from Webster?
It's about 40 miles, 35, 40 miles, something like that. And so I would run down there every now and again, see my my step-grandfather, visit him or some other relatives in the area. But it was kind of nice, we did a few of the local things, what have you. And the duty was okay. It was instructor duty, and they were still training a lot of people, and they were running two shifts. I worked from 6 in the morning until noon, and non-stop instruction. It was, and after that, then after your classes were over at noon, then you would do any of your admin stuff or your physical training or things like that, whatever you had to do. But yeah, that was. Then there was another class that went from noontime until 6, so they were really trying to pump them up. But you said, this thing about Cold War and signals intelligence and what have you. I mean, that's how many people we were using in this business, and that was just the Army.
Right.
You had the Navy and the Air Force. So it had civilians. NSA had people that they used out there in the field. So anyway, I did that for quite a while. I was a senior instructor, there, and I got locked in for 18 months. But after that, right after that, I finally got my orders for Germany, which I wanted, and I was assigned to an ASA battalion out in Germany, in Augsburg, Germany. Mm-hmm. The company was actually the 409th ASA company, and our group headquarters was down in Munich, Germany. That was the 66th MI group. They were the big MI group there in Germany. And that was a tactical assignment. And we had a lot of tactical equipment. We were doing intercept and direction finding and things like that, and they had a cell that did analysis of all this, and the whole focus was the Warsaw Pact nations, where this was the Cold War. And had spent 3.5 years there, and
wow.
it was the off-duty time was really a lot of fun, but the work was fun too, and we had some interesting TDYs. I brought some soldiers down to Italy, and as far north as Scotland and as far south as Italy, the tip of Italy. And we were, what radio direction finding is, right? So you hear a signal and you figure out where it's coming from. Well, if you only have one station, you can only figure out a line, where it's going, but you don't know how deep it is, okay? But if you get 2, 3, 4 stations where they intersect, those lines intersect, tells you how far away the target is from you. So that's why we were going from Italy to, it was a training mission, if you will, but it was fun to do. You're training to be ready for a war if the war broke out with the Soviet Union or Warsaw Pact, that kind of thing. So that we did a lot of that kind of work, and again, it was pretty interesting. One of my more memorable TDYs, the temporary duty, was when we were setting up this base station. We shipped some equipment to Scotland, and the way we got there was on a 212-foot Dutch freighter. We tried to use the U.S. Air Force, but they were too slow and too expensive. So after all was said and done, we went and we got a commercial ship and put our equipment on this commercial ship. And because it was not a passenger ship, it was commercial, my buddy and I were signed on as, he was the first sergeant, I was the operations sergeant. We were signed on as seamen, able-bodied seamen, and we sailed across the North Sea. We left out of Hamburg, Germany, and across the sea. We came in at a place called Leith, Scotland, which is just below Edinburgh. It's right. Edinburgh's up on a hill, and Leith is on the coast. And offloaded the equipment and drove up to Edsel, which was the base up there.
You really are seeing the world.
Yeah, we saw quite a bit, and we came home through the Air Force. We went down to I don't know, Lake and Heath, one of the Air Force bases that they had there in England, and came back to Germany. So yeah, that was pretty. It was fun. It was interesting. Did a lot of kind of innovative things, if you will, and. But then after the 4 years there, my wife being from Hawaii, as I mentioned, and her folks lived there in Hawaii, right on Oahu, they're up on the North Shore. And I talked to my assignment manager and I said, gee, I'd really like to go to Hawaii from Germany, and kind of pleaded my case. And they, luckily for me, they needed people pretty badly in Hawaii. And they had just started this new what they call a field station, and I thought I'd be going there. And he said, oh, no, we're not going to send you there. We're going to send you to the 25th Infantry Division. So I had a lot of my friends going to Hawaii, and they had this nice strategic assignment, where they worked in this air-conditioned building, underground, but it was a nice air-conditioned building. But I was with it was called the 125th Seaweed Battalion, CEWI. And I spent 2.5 years there as a first sergeant. And which was probably the best job I ever had. I mean, there's really nothing like being a first sergeant. And you run the company. You call your formations every morning, and you are in charge of what the company does. And it really is a very, very rewarding assignment. I think if you talk to any first sergeant, they'll probably tell you that's probably the best job they ever had, was being a first sergeant, and even better than being a sergeant major. The soldiers are pretty well all, they're all yours. So it was good. So I did that for 2.5 years. It would have been 3 years, but they cut my tour by 6 months to send me to the Sergeant Major Academy at Fort Bliss. But while I was in Hawaii with the 125th, the big thing there was we would go to Team Spirit, the Team Spirit exercise, which was held in Korea. And it was an annual, they don't do it anymore, but it was an annual event. And we would train up, we'd go to the big island of Hawaii, and we'd train there, and then we'd go over to Team Spirit. So it was you got to exercise a lot of different things, your deployment, how you would move your unit, how you would pack, what you take, and what have you. And then when you get over there, you operate during the exercise. And what we would do, we would get onto the peninsula, the Korean peninsula, and you would exercise from east to west, not north to south, because the North Koreans would view that as provocation, that kind of thing. Yeah. So we'd go over there and we'd do the Team Spirit exercise. And my soldiers were MI soldiers, and I would take the opportunity to get them inside one of these listening stations that we have. And there was one in Korea. And so while we're there in Korea, we'd go, this was not for a few days, I mean, we'd go for a month or 6 weeks, we'd be over there. And I'd get them in those, in that building, and they could get some live training on real systems, you know, that kind of thing. And then we'd do the exercise, and then maybe a little more training would come back. So good tour, did a lot of good things, and it was very, very physical. We did a lot of physical training and a lot of other kinds of physical activities, that type of thing, because we were with an infantry division. So, you know, you're not going to sit around and get fat. You know, you're going to be very, very active, very physical. So anyway, that was a good assignment. While I was there, as I said, I got selected for the Sergeant's Major Academy. And we went in January. And I spent 6 months there, and it was a good 6 months. It was kind of fun because it was going back to some place where my wife and I had been stationed before. Both the kids were born there, so we got to show them where they were born, the first house they ever lived in. One very unfortunate thing that I do remember from that assignment, there was two things really that really bad. One of them was I was home and packing. We're getting ready to leave, actually, leave El Paso, and my neighbor pulls in. He says, "Hey, did you hear about the Challenger?" I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, it blew up." I said, "Oh, you know, that was how I heard of it," and I still remember that moment, him, you know, telling me that it blew up. And the other one was that after El Paso, that next door neighbor I'm telling you about. He got reassigned to, I think it was Fort Knox or Fort Campbell, one of the two, and I got reassigned again to Germany. I'm in Wiesbaden this time, and I reading about this horrific accident that happened on an interstate where it was a church organization. Their school bus was hit by a guy in a pickup truck. I think it was a drunk driver, and a few of the kids were killed, and unfortunately one of them who was killed was my next door neighbor, their only child. Billy, yeah. And I don't know why. I was reading the article, and before I got to the names, there was just something inside of me that says, "Oh, you know, I think it's going to be his name's going to be there." And sure enough, it was. It just because the article said, "Oh, they were military kids," and you know that kind of thing, and coming out of the fort, I'm like, "Oh man!" And sure enough, unfortunately, it was him. But. Anyway, the Sergeant's Major Academy was challenging, good 6 months. We learned a lot. You're with all of these Type A personalities. As a matter of fact, they told us this, is there will be no honor graduate or distinguished graduate. He said, there's just too much competition here. You guys are all, you know, Type A, want to succeed, you know, be the first, be the best, all that. So, anyway, we had our graduation, and oh, son of a gun! I'm having a senior moment. He was the USARA commander, a 4-star general. He came in to speak to us, and I just lost his name. But he's speaking to the whole audience, and he's kind of promoting Germany. And he says, "Hey, anybody wants to go to Germany? Let me know." You know, so some of us raised our hands, and they took our names down. And sure enough, I got orders to Germany. You know, I didn't really want to go to a Fort Campbell, a Fort Carson, you know, that kind of thing. I'd rather be deployed as opposed to sitting back in the States. And fortunately, my wife is like that too. You know, she, yeah, we can go overseas, let's go overseas. So we went to Wiesbaden, and I was a sergeant major. That was my first sergeant major assignment. And it was the 1st MI Battalion Aerial Exploitation. And we had 2 companies of aircraft. Well, they call it the Mohawk, which is an observation kind of vehicle, twin engine, kind of a muscular looking aircraft. And the other one was a C-12, which is a very, at that time it was a very modern aircraft, two engine Beechcraft, made by Beechcraft. But both of these were filled with electronic gear. And the Beechcraft, the C-12s, they would they were literally like a flying receiver up in the air, and they would just fly along the border and then pick up signals and then downlink them to the ground. And our operators, our MI operators, did all the work on the ground in a processing facility, which was 4 trailers, 4 that were connected together. And the other aircraft did radar and it did what they call MTI, moving target indicators, and but it basically radar. And the company, I think, just recently they stood them down. They were there for years and years and years, and this was all to fight the Cold War. Our motto in that battalion was the eyes of the deep battle. So we were the ability to get up into the sky and look into the battlefield, look, beyond what the guy on the ground could see. So we did that, and my tour was 3 years, but I extended for another year. We stayed there 4 years. The work was good, like what we were doing. The family was happy. We did a lot of travel and what have you in the area, and did a lot of camping. You mentioned Boy Scouts and camping. I had all my camping gear, and my kids, wife and I, we camped from Italy and all through Germany and the Netherlands, and we camped in Norway and Sweden, Denmark.
Wow.
So we camped in a lot of places, and it was all fun. It was always a good time. The work was very good. It was rewarding work. You're kind of the front line of America's defenses, if you will. Back then, the Warsaw Pact and NATO, that type of thing. So all that was good. And then after 4 years there, I got an assignment at Fort Monmouth, and I really didn't know where Fort Monmouth was, hadn't heard of it, and wasn't so sure this was the greatest place to go or whatever. But anyway, got the assignment, had no choice in that, and came here, and we had been in Europe for 4 years, so told my wife, well, after we come back, get settled, I'll take a leave, and then we'll go to Hawaii and see your folks and show off the grandkids and all that kind of stuff, let them see the grandkids again. And so while I was in Hawaii, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and I got a call from the battalion saying, well, you're on leave, but how long before you're back? I'm going to be back. And so I said, well, I'll be there next week. And came back, and we just started to get everybody geared up. We were geared up for that part of the world anyway. I was a sergeant major. I had left that out. I was a sergeant major of the 513th Military Intelligence Brigade, and we were subordinate to 3rd Army, which was down at Fort McPherson, Georgia at the time. And so anyway, this was the kind of work we were doing anyway. We had soldiers in that part of the world, and some of it's kind of interesting. I can't really speak to, but we had soldiers there, in that part of the world anyway. So came back, and we just started. We got a task force going and sent that over, and they were part of the initial forces, and then eventually most of the brigade closed in the base of operations was Saudi Arabia up there at Riyadh, the capital, and the General Schwarzkopf was the CENTCOM commander, so he was in charge of all forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, etc. But the Army forces were commanded by General Yosak, who was 3rd Army, which is the same command that Patton had years ago. And
so did you go?
Yes, that's kind of leading up to, we all...
So you went to Riyadh?
Well, the base camp was at Riyadh, but we had soldiers all throughout that area, to include the Emirates and all through Saudi Arabia, not just Riyadh. We had them all through there, and then so we prepared, and everybody got supplied, got their marching orders, so to speak, what have you, and then the invasion took place, and we pushed into Kuwait, and we had some of the first forces in Kuwait, And you know, compared to Vietnam, it was really, I mean, it was, you know, it was that quick. But you know, it's kind of, you know, you get what you get. One of my more vivid memories there of it is right after the war ended. We were in Kuwait. We're setting up all of our intelligence gathering stuff and what have you, and because we know we're going to be here for a while, and, you know, even at that time we figured we'd be there for a while. But I remember being there at the airport in Kuwait, and I was standing there with one of my operations sergeants, and it was evening, it had just gotten dark, and he said, "Oh my God, Sergeant Major, look at those oil fields. All these oil wells were on fire." He says, "God, you know, how many? I wonder how many are out there. Look at how, you know, there are so many." And we did a quick count, and there was over 100 fires, 100 individual fires. And you know, I remember that. I'm thinking, "Oh my Lord," you know, it was just an act of spite, if you will. What the Iraqis did was, as they were pulling out, they just set everything on fire. But also,
and how long did it take to put those out? I forget.
It took months to get them, yeah, to get them all out. And I remember the area up there, depending upon the way the wind was shifting, at times just black smoke. You couldn't see anything, and even, you know, breathing. I'm thinking, "Oh man, I'm about ready to put my gas mask on," because I can't imagine how much damage, you know, this is going to be doing to your body. So fortunately, they were putting them out, and it, you know, kind of cleared up. But I remember that. I remember oil running across the roads and things like that. It was.
How long were you there?
Not too 4 months or 5 months, something. It wasn't long. The war was very quick. I wasn't there. I wasn't one of the first ones on the ground. We had a task force over there, and the task force set up, got everything running, and then when we got a bigger presence, and I came over, you know, with most of the brigade, and then, you know, they just kept coming in and coming in and coming in. It was truly amazing. By the end of the war, I think our brigade had doubled in size, and we had people. We were augmented, people from all over the country, you know, military people from all over the country, to include, ironically, an old reserve unit out of Orlando, Florida, that had some of the very same planes that we flew in El Paso. Not the same kind, the same planes. Because I remember the tail numbers, and I said, "You've got to be kidding me." They changed the inside gear, but the planes were the same. And I saw them over there. And my old unit from Vietnam, from Germany, the 1st MI, I saw some of those people over there also. So, anyway, it didn't last too long, and, you know, once hostilities were over, then we decided who we were going to leave there, and started getting ready to bring the rest of the people back, the equipment, the people, etc. So that was our focus. And then came back after Desert Storm was over, and stayed at Fort Monmouth until I retired in '94. During that time, we continued to support operations in the Mideast. The other thing we prepared to do towards the end was to move the unit from Fort Monmouth to Fort Gordon, which, you know, I believe truly political. I don't see where it was militarily necessary, but we were told we had to move, so we did that. We moved the brigade to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and that's where the brigade is today. The 513th is located at Fort Gordon. While I was with the brigade too, it did make one other trip. I didn't stay there very long because we were only there TDY. The brigade commander at that time was Colonel Noonan, eventually became the descent of the Army, General Noonan. But he and I went TDY to Somalia when all the fighting was going on, and he made a visit to our soldiers. We had quite a few soldiers there on the ground who were doing the intel piece there. So we went out and saw them, and that was quite a sight to see. It was the soldiers were living on the University of Somalia, their national university. There was no education going on in that country at all. Everything, you know, was closed. It was just complete anarchy. And it stayed there for, I don't know, we were there for a few days, a week, less than a week. And then we went, from there we went to, stopped in to Cairo because we had people in Cairo. And Cairo, we went to Munich to see that MI group I told you about that was at 66, and then we came home. So that was an interesting side trip while I was there with the 513th. But
when you said that they moved to Fort Gordon, you didn't have to move, right?
no, we got them in place, got everything set up, and this Colonel Noonan I had mentioned, that was the last thing that he and I did as a team, the command team. He was there for 2 years. I had Colonel Robeson when we went to Desert Storm. Colonel Robeson was there for 2 years, and Colonel Noonan came in. And with Colonel Noonan, unfortunately, we had that task. We moved everything down there. So we went down there, and we did a change of responsibility ceremony for me. And the very next day, we did a change of command ceremony for Colonel Noonan, and that established the flag at Fort Gordon. That was it. The brigade was at Gordon. The commander was at Gordon, that kind of thing. So
Was that 94?
94. Yeah, that was.
And that's when you retired?
Yes. Yeah. I had actually. I mean, that occurred in late in July, but I had so much leave time that I didn't actually. My retirement was not until
Right, November.
November. But that occurred in the summer of '94.
So how'd you end up staying in Jersey? I would think that you would have gone to Hawaii.
No, it's it's funny. My wife's from Hawaii, but I don't think she really wants to live there, even though we were stationed there, what have you. And she enjoys it here. And I, like many military people, you end up retiring at the last place you were stationed. It's because it's where many times the kids were in school, which was our case, and it's also where you make contacts, you make friends. It's where you can get a job. And so I looked around and I said, my son's a sophomore in high school, daughter's off to college. My son had really lots of good things going on in his life at that time, and I didn't want to take him out of the high school. If I did, I would have gone to Fort Gordon probably for a year, so he would have spent a couple of years in high school here, a year at Gordon, and then maybe a year somewhere else. Or they said, well, you can go back to Germany, and I could have gone to the 66, which would have been a nice assignment, but they were in a process of moving because Germany was downsizing. And he probably would have spent a year in high school in Augsburg, and then maybe another year in high school in Darmstadt or something like that. And I said, I'm not going to do that to him. So, I did meet people here. I knew people. I had an opportunity. There was a hiring freeze at that time for government employees, but I had my clearance, which was beneficial, and I went to work for as a contractor for the Software Engineering Center on Fort Monmouth, and then there was a BRAC, and they closed an organization on Vin Hill Farms down in Warrenton, Virginia. It was the I2WD, Intelligence and Information Warfare Directorate, and there were another name down there, but they brought them up here and established them, and I'm thinking to myself, not all of those people are going to come from Virginia up to New Jersey, and I was right, and they didn't, so the hiring freeze, they made exceptions to the hiring freeze. So I went ahead and applied, and I got picked up as an intelligence research specialist with the Department of the Army. So it all worked out well.
At Fort Monmouth?
At Fort Monmouth, yeah. So it worked out quite well.
Sounds like it, yeah.
It did, and I worked there until they closed the fort.
And it's cool that you said that, because not everybody went down to Aberdeen, Maryland when they closed the fort.
Oh, no. No, a lot of people jumped ship, as they would say. And some went up to Picatinny, some went out to Fort Dix, and to this day, there are still people who are commuting. And, between, they'll go down there and stay there Monday through Thursday or Friday, and then come back up for the weekend. Mm-hmm. And I thought about doing that. I had a desk down here. My job went down here, and I probably that close to doing it. And then finally, we got to the end, and I said, I just don't want to do this. I don't want to be home on the weekend, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the great ironies of life, My son-in-law is an Army JAG. He's a major, and he was stationed in Hawaii, but his last assignment was Hawaii. And when they reassigned him to the States, his first assignment was going to be Fort Jackson, South Carolina. He'd like him to be a little closer. They turned around and canceled that assignment and reassigned him to Aberdeen, Maryland. So he is working in the building where I would have worked, of that complex.
Oh, that's unusual.
Yeah, when they bracked it and, sent all those people down there, they built this campus, if you will, and he is in one of those buildings.
So how long have you been retired from Department of the Army?
I retired in when the fort closed in 2011. I retired in September 2011. Yeah. So that was when they closed, and I went into retirement. So I retired about a year earlier than I would have liked to, maybe 2. I would have liked to have worked another year or 2. And you always want to call your own shots. But in this case here, the Army called it for me.
But I feel like you called your own shots about seeing the world.
I did. I was
It's really something.
I was very successful. And I've told people that if you are proactive, and it doesn't always work. I mean, I didn't want Fort Devens, but I got Fort Devens, and I didn't want Fort Monmouth. It was not on my list, but as it turns out, it was a very good assignment for me. But pretty much, with the Taiwan and the Japan and the 2 Germany assignments and Hawaii assignment, I pretty well, dictated where I went. And that, I dictated through request and what have you, but it all, they were the places I wanted to go. So that was good. No complaints there, none whatsoever.
That's great. Well, Jack, I just want to say before we look at your items that I'm honored and humbled that you're here today to speak to me of your sacrifice and contributions that you made in service to your country, and thank you, and God bless you, and welcome home.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Okay, do you want to point out anything on your uniform?
No, I think of, of anything, I'm probably the proudest of it, the air medal and the wings. Ironically, with all that time I was flying over there, I have 1 air medal. As draftees, we really didn't pay much attention to awards and decorations. And fortunately, my buddy looked out for me when I was getting ready to leave Vietnam. He says, "My God, you don't even have your basic air medal yet." So he went ahead and made sure I got that.
Very nice. And you said you just wore this recently.
Yes, at Fort Rucker, Alabama, where we celebrated the 50th anniversary of our helicopter company's arrival in Vietnam.
Oh, okay. All right, and
Okay.
can you point out your shadow box? Who put your shadow box together?
I went ahead and purchased everything and pretty well designed it, and I went locally. There's a commercial place. It's called Colorist. It's on Newman Springs Road.
Oh, that sounds familiar, yeah.
Okay, before you hit 35 on the left-hand side. And there was a young lady in there. I brought her everything and gave her the layout. And what I've included my name, of course, the periods of service, the awards, and my last rank, which is Command Sergeant Major. And the two patches, the one on the, as you're looking at it to the left, that's the 1st Aviation Brigade, and the one on the right is the 513th Military Intelligence Brigade. And the reason I chose those 2 patches was because those were the 2 units that I served with in combat.
Very nice.
And the young lady who put it together, had a fairly artistic eye, so she managed to get everything arranged properly, etc.
Why is it your favorite photo?
Well, I just think it's pretty.
It is, yeah.
It reminds me very much of what remember I said we had lots of mountains everywhere and in valleys.
It looks very peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does. And we were all in the company together. The person on the far right lives right across the river in New York, and the one in the center, he's in Jersey, South Jersey now. He was up in North Jersey, but yeah, I don't even know if these are. Yeah, they're just. I don't know that we really need to do the photo album.
Okay.
But yeah, that's fine. I actually brought it more for you. You could catch. Remember I was talking about how the tents were framed out with wood?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Did you want to talk about something in my Iraq map?
Oh.
We were looking at it before.
Oh, no, this, we lived in tents, but when there's someone captured weapons. This is the one time we had a party. It was actually just before, it was billed as a Christmas party, but it was before December 8th because Crosby went missing December 8th.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Tom Berlago, he wore a suit. Lord knows, who knows why he brought a suit, but he brought a suit. Yeah.
He wanted to look nice for a party, or feel like he
but that was the only party we ever had. We had one in the whole year. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's just taken out of the newspaper many years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And in the area we were talking about, I mentioned places like I first came in at Fanrang. Okay, and there was Nha Trang, and here's Tuiwa. I mentioned Tuiwa and Phu Hep. Okay, in the past, that aircraft 811. See, they left here, and you could come right down here. There was a pass. Okay, and I think with the monsoons, they couldn't get through the pass.
Oh, I see.
And they impacted this. A lot of these places, unfortunately, my base camp was right across the road here where this 11 is. Remember I mentioned a mountain called Big Charlie? Mm-hmm. That's this piece of land right there where they put that number 11. And
I really could use a copy of this.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All of these towns are what I'm hearing about in my interviews.
Sure. When I said we went down to pick up that helicopter and we went AWOL to Vung Tau, Vung Tau was right down there.
Oh.
Okay, and there's Saigon. So, see, we flew down to Long Binh to pick up the helicopter, and then we just went, we were supposed to come right back to Ninh Hoa. And Ninh Hoa is actually right about where that crease is, right there.
So...
Can you make a copy of this? Do you have something?
I don't know if I can. But Vung Tau was the safest part of South Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, that was... there was never any fighting there or anything. That was what they would call an in-country R&R facility.
Where was the Mekong Delta?
Delta's down in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't very safe.
Well, there was fighting all over.
Oh, now I see. It's labeled there.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And we were in what is referred to as the Highlands, the Central Highlands.
Oh, okay.
And
I-Corps is that?
I-Corps is up here. This is 2 Corps down here. This is
okay.
Yeah, I-Corps, 2 Corps, 3 and 4. They had 4 corps.
Right.
What I was looking for was where I came in country was Pleiku. That's where that C-130, we landed at Pleiku, and then we flew to An Khê, and then from An Khê, flew down to Nha Trang. And then remember that Dong Batin I mentioned by Cam Ranh Dinh?
Yes.
Yeah, it's right there. And these were the people who were unfortunately were killed. Yeah, they have it as 2 December. I thought it was 8. I think, I want to say that's wrong. I thought it was 8 December. But anyway, unfortunately, these are the guys who were killed.
Okay.
Fort Rucker, and I think there are only 2 companies that they have monuments to, and ours is happens to be one of them.
That's quite an honor.
It was, we were quite honored. Oh, and there's one of the Jokers. See the Joker emblem?
Let me see.
Yeah, because you got the 1st platoon, 2nd. We were Snoopy, and they were the the Wild Deuces, and there was the Hanger Rats, who were the maintenance detachment. Flight in, you have all these infantry soldiers up here. Doesn't show up very well, and you can see the guys here on the skids getting ready to jump out. When I went in there, TDY, where we went to was right here, Camp Victory. And
Right under
we were
Baghdad.
there.
No, where is it?
Right by the airport, Camp Victory. Yeah, that's where we went. And we were doing some electronic testing, with counter IED stuff. Was the work we were doing. That organization I worked for on Fort Monmouth, the I2WD, and we put a lot of systems in here in Afghanistan.
And what was happening in Baghdad at the time?
Well, no, that's just where we were. We came in to do the testing. This is when how many years ago was this? There were still quite a few soldiers there. We flew into Kuwait and then caught the night. You have a flight. They come in at night. And we caught that flight out of Kuwait City. This reminds me like a Desert Storm. Everybody was familiar with all those pictures of the Highway of Death. Well, there was a second one up over here that I remember going to also, which didn't really make the news because it wasn't as gruesome as it were as that other one. Anyway, I was just, I've not seen this map. It's from the Stars and Stripes I see. But it's pretty good. It gives all the bases.
That's how I feel about your Vietnam map.